Mr. Speaker, as a result of the new reformed NHS dentistry contract, there are now more NHS dentists across the UK.
People are now travelling hundreds of miles in search of dental treatment. Some are actually pulling out their own teeth. 9 in 10 NHS dental practices across the UK are not even accepting new adult patients for treatment under the health service. 8 in 10 are not taking on children. In some parts of the country, dental deserts have left just one NHS dentist per 16,000 people.
It's the same old Labour, Mr. Speaker. They always run out of other people's money.
Imagine the Prime Minister's shock when he finds out it's his party which has been in power for the past 12 years.
If we want to safeguard the future of our public services and make sure that our young people inherit a strong economy, we must be disciplined on spending and borrowing.
Well, let's not forget that just a few months ago, the Conservative government actually crashed the economy with its plans for unfunded tax cuts for the rich.
Mr. Speaker, we've always been clear that we want to have constructive dialogue with the unions.
It's just complete bollocks. The government has outright refused to negotiate over pay.
If Steve Barclay had sat down this week with the nurses and discussed pay, not the other things, but discussed pay, the strikes would have not gone ahead today.
In fact, when it comes to a fair pay rise for nurses, Sunak's government has simply engaged in a shameless campaign of misinformation, outright lies and breathtaking dishonesty.
When it comes to the issue of pay, we have accepted in full the independent recommendations of the pay review bodies.
Well, again, imagine the Prime Minister's shock when he finds out UK media has already woken up to this bollocks.
We accepted in full the recommendations of what is an independent process, the pay review body process.
Well, is it independent?
It's hugely regrettable. Yes, it is.
But you appoint the people on that committee, don't you? And you set the parameters for the pay decisions, so it's not really independent.
We believe, Kay, that the right approach is to have the independent pay review body look at these issues in terms of what is...
The pay review body is not independent, is
But it is independent, and even the opposition...
The chair of the independent pay review body is chosen by the Prime Minister, and ministers choose other people within that pay review body, so it's not independent.
The government handpicks the members and sets the remit, and then it's delighted when the body comes back with an offer of another crappy real terms pay cut. And remember this, if the offer's unfair, the government's own health minister has admitted...
You know, we could have ignored the pay review body's recommendation. So the pay review body, you're right, we don't have to stick to the recommendation.
And it gets worse. The evidence on which the pay review body made its recommendations was submitted in February last year, when inflation was roughly half what it is now. And sit down for this next bit. Here's the business secretary shamelessly telling viewers the NHS pay review body recommendations the government accepted in full used a projection of inflation which was more or less correct.
The independent pay review bodies, who actually don't apply in every area, but they do in the NHS, they took into account and they said, look, we used the projection of inflation, which was more or less correct.
Inflation is almost double the figure the NHS pay review body factored into its pay recommendations. So when the business secretary said this,
said, look, we used the projection of inflation, which was more or less correct.
He was again talking absolute bollocks, just like the rest of the government.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about the minimum safety legislation. Let's just talk about it a little bit further, because this is a simple proposition that no one denies the union's freedom to strike.
Well, this government certainly does, and let's give the legislation he's talking about its full name. It's called the Strikes Minimum Service Levels Bill. Sunak's anti-strike laws will reduce the right of workers to take industrial action, forcing them to work against their will and allowing them to be sacked if they won't submit. And it comes on top of the government's public order bill, which will treat peaceful protest like knife and gang crime, and its Bill of Rights bill, which will reduce human rights protections and significantly reduce government accountability. See a pattern emerging here. They're all measures designed to restrict opportunities for individuals and groups to express their opposition to the government. Here's a radical idea. Instead of robbing workers of their basic democratic right to withdraw their labour, why not just pay them a fair wage for a fair day's work instead?